All right, Tim, we're live. How you
Dude,
doing, buddy?
I'm doing phenomenal. We're talking about how hard life is, and I mean, you and I are trading back stories and things, and you're saying, "Oh, life's hard." I've had this. You had a Honda Accord, and it had heat, like permanent heat. What was going on?
Yeah, it was a hole in the firewall, and it would blow hot air on you, and it had no air conditioning. So
Damn!
I had to drive 56 miles from Prince Frederick to Beltsville, and the
Wow.
car had no muffler. So everybody's looking at you, and then it's blowing heat on you. And I remember just there's a stoplight like at the end of four when you get up into PG,
Yeah.
and just sitting there and
Ah,
feeling hot air blowing on you. And sometimes you can roll the window down, it'll blow the hot air out. But when you get to the light, it just blows hot air on you. And I would get to work and I would be drenched in sweat. And then we worked in like a server farm. So it was like 62 degrees in there. And I would go into a coma when I got to work because the shock of the cold, I'd just sit there and like fall asleep and wake back up like an hour later. But yeah.
so you had like the perfect environment. Think about it. You did the sauna thing first. You worked.
Yeah.
You
That's
drove
how I
in a
got so healthy.
sauna.
Exactly.
Yeah, brother, I'm impressed as shit. And then you got to work and you took the ice cold plunge every day.
Yeah, if I had only thought that in my head, it would have made it a lot easier because I wasn't thinking that at the
Yeah.
time.
But that comes down to the not in my backyard thing, right? I mean, think about
Well,
it.
tell me about this Honda CVR RV. What did you say you had, Tim?
Brian and I are
Like
trading.
we're trying to figure out who had a more
Yeah.
struggle bus car. I,
And so I was driving back in the 1980s. I got transferred from Clinton to Gaithersburg, and so my drive went from Nanjamoy, went from 45 minutes to almost 2 hours. And Brian and I were laughing because I looked at things and said, "Wow!" I said, realistically, just looking at where I'm at now, here we are driving along. I got almost 300,000 miles. I had no heat for 2 years, and I'm thinking to myself, I would have loved heat. But what did I do? Bundled up, got the scarves on, and I told Brian, I said, we were so broke back then, we couldn't afford the vowels. It was a Honda CVVC, not even a Civic. Couldn't afford the eyes, you know what I'm talking about? But my point of the matter is, it was tough. And I told Brian it was so bad that the mice would crawl into the car and then they would die during the winter time in the heat in the air conditioning vents. Then this in the spring when you finally turn the air conditioning on, their little skeletons would come out of the vents. But what's that tell you? It tells
I
us
guess it didn't stink though
uh,
because it was so cold in the winter. Like they died and
they
decomposed
died and
in the
decomposed. It was a
refrigerator.
win-win, dude. Exactly right, man. But my
Okay.
point of the matter is, we were resilient, right? Isn't that what we're talking about? Being resilient in this marketplace. That's what it comes
Yes.
down to, Brian. You got to be
Yeah.
resilient. I don't know what else to
Yeah.
tell you. So let's talk about what is not in my backyard thinking. And I'll tell you a really funny story when we get into it. But what are you seeing in the marketplace?
Well, I'll give you like a anecdotal answer.
Yeah,
So there was recently the Holiday Inn in Solomons was sold to a developer who was going to turn into a
yeah,
retirement home, and then either the project or the developer went upside down, and it came back available. The original. This is the story. I don't know all the facts, but this is what I was told. The original owner went to the county and proposed I will keep the half of the hotel, and this is a real nice hotel. If y'all know the Solomon's Holiday Inn, it's a super nice
it is
hotel.
nice, man. Here we are.
Um, I'll keep it as a retirement home,
Wow.
either 55 and up or like nursing home. I don't know.
Sure.
And then the other half, we're gonna do like condos or apartments. And I think uh, to the commissioner, every single one said, I got voted as a county commissioner based on a simple principle: no growth.
But you're not
Not
adding,
in
Brian, and this is already
Well,
there.
yeah, it would be because those are currently unoccupied units, and what they were requesting was a rezoning to, what we have here is low density housing, and it would turn it into, I don't know, medium density or high density.
Right?
They would have had to rezone it, and I don't know if that had implications for the surrounding areas. Like if you have high density in one zip code or one project, the one next to it is allowed to do something
Right.
similar. I don't know,
Hmm.
but they all said like, I'm sorry. So now if you drive there, there's like orange cones and the landscaping is growing over this hotel.
Wow.
And it really speaks to the wider issue of people who do not want growth. And I can understand because I'm one of those people. You know, there's a bumper sticker that was famous in the 90s, keep Calvert country. And the idea was in the 90s, there was a lot of growth in Calvert County where I live. And the farmers would put these stickers on their farm trucks and drive around. And, you know, the idea was like the DC, PG County, Waldorf, you know, those guys live differently. We like to look at the cornfields and the country roads and the trees and the barns. And we like to have privacy, and we like to, you know, the dream of Calvert is like 3 acres back in the woods. And that's kind of the thing. But there's a wider like concept there, and that is that when you add new houses, you're adding cars on the road, which DC has the 3rd worst traffic in the country,
Right.
and you're adding more kids in the school system. You're adding more people for the police to respond to. You're adding all of that. And there is a nationwide thought of we don't want new affordable or even housing at all, but particularly affordable housing, which nowadays you could almost say is, you know, we're talking like $300,000 to $400,000 houses, but even $400,000 to $500,000 houses.
Right.
No one's building them, and in reality, nobody wants them. But the problem is, the population is increasing, and at the same time, the number of houses is not. So it's putting this crush on the housing market. And you know, it's like, have you been watching the news about the? This is we're gonna get political for a second, but
Okay.
the governor of New York comes out on TV and says, "We're a sanctuary city. If you come here, we're going to promise you have a place to live."
Wow. That's
So he
awesome.
gets on TV and says that, and then the governor Abbott of Texas is like, "All right, cool, bet, put them on the bus, send them to New York." And they just kicked a bunch of kids either out of school. I didn't read the whole article. They either kicked them out of school or they used a school that wasn't being used or whatever. And now they're putting them in a school and people are all upset. They're renting hotels, apartments,
Nice
they're-
place. Oh,
and
yeah.
at the same time, they're turning around and saying, we're going to cut back on police. We're going to cut back on social services in order to house the immigrants. And people are like, not in my backyard. Like, we should support him. And again, I'm not trying to get political, but the concept literally it's like the same. Like, we should support immigration. We support low income housing because people that don't make a lot of money need a place to live, but not in my backyard.
Well, and I think, Brian, let's go backwards. They what they actually did was they it was an active high school, if I'm not mistaken, and basically what they did was they said, hey, don't report to school. We're going to house everybody during the cold
Tim
snap.
read the article.
Yep,
Go
I
ahead.
did read the article. I mean, there's no question about that. So that's number one. Number two,
Yeah.
more importantly, I think, you know, part of the problem is we have to pay for these institutions. We have to pay for things, and the politicians need to start taking responsibility for their actions. I mean, let's face it.
Well, we voted for the politicians, and the idea is the people in these areas and all the areas don't want a bunch of new houses.
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, now you're going to lose, you ready? The hotel taxes, the property taxes, all the revenue generation that was supporting these facilities now goes away. And I think it's short-sighted because look, you've got to be able to support your service industry. You've got to be able to support the people. You can have all these beautiful houses, but there's nobody there to take care of them.
But we already have
there
someone
to-
there to take care of everything. It's already working fine.
Yeah, it's well, except for, you know, at the same time, costs are going up, Brian, and costs are going up because nobody can live in Calvert County. But I mean, let's face it, it's just not Calvert. I mean, I'm dealing with a developer that I'm helping out right now, and he called me up and said, Tim, can you help me? Because I'm trying to justify with the county to be able to increase the density to what's called workforce housing versus affordable housing. And we do that, we can decrease some of the green space to put in, you know, 15 to 20 more units in this project. And I said,
So
well,
is that an upgrade from affordable housing is workforce housing? Okay.
workforce housing. And I said, what do you want to do? He said, Tim, he said, I'm just trying to increase the number of units for 2 reasons. Number one, to support the county and the community. Number four, to make the development affordable. And I said, well, why does it cost so much? He said, it'll take at least 2 years for the county to approve the project. And I'm thinking to myself, who pays for these county people? Why is it taking 2 years to process the development of a project through. That blows
It's
my mind.
deliberate, though. It's deliberate. It's done that way
Exactly.
deliberately because they don't want to make it easy for people to build houses. So, you and I talked about this on a previous podcast, the idea that they could wave a magic wand
Yep.
and allow people to build accessory apartments on
Right.
their
Correct.
property.
Correct.
And technically you can do it. You have to pay an impact fee.
Yeah.
But what will happen is once you decide, in Southern Maryland in particular, decide to do that,
Yep.
they're going to make you put in a new septic, which is what, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
Correct.
The permits are going to take forever, and
And-
you're going to have to pay an impact fee. There's no way to recoup that cost by maybe charging rent for $800 a month to cover all that.
Or cycle around. Okay, so you're saying, okay, you know what? We can only have so many units or so much to do, but then you've got Section 8 housing. You've got to be able to support the people that don't have sufficient funding, or you've got a lot of folks that don't have, let's face it, you don't have good housing, you're not going to have a good job. I mean, let's just call it what it is. So it's a cycle, and you've got to recognize that if you're going to pay for certain things, if you want certain services, you want certain expenses, you've got to kill the not in my backyard thinking, and you've got to create.
But I'm one of those people, and so are you, Tim. That's the thing.
Okay, I live in Charles County. What's happening?
Yeah, but how big is of a piece of land do you have, Tim?
I have a couple acres. I mean, this is but I live in the country. I live in the back. I mean, it is what it is.
But you deliberately chose a piece of property, so your house is like. Can you see your neighbor from your house?
Barely. I can see the light.
You can see the light.
I'm
That's far, Tim. If you can only see the light through a long field, that's far, Tim. Think about that for a second.
Surrounded by woods. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Woods.
Exactly, because you want to live far away from everybody else, correct?
Yeah, I do. But here's the thing.
So do I, Tim. So does everybody else.
It comes down to, Brian, we're not talking about building in a country setting. This was Solomon's Island, where the hotel was already in place. The utilities are already in place. The plumbing is.
I don't know the whole story, Tim, but I remember when the last election came, and I don't do a lot of local politics, so it's going to be lacking in details here. But there was a proposal at some point to put in apartments in Lusby, and people were frantic about it. And let's just, explain why. It's
right.
It's going to be the roads, it's going to be the schools. But when you think apartments, what do you think of? You think of low-income housing, which brings crime. And that's also what's going on here. It's like, look at the other more affluent parts of our country. They deliberately build the areas that don't have low-income housing in them. And again, I could understand. I wouldn't want a large apartment complex in Lusby because I would be concerned about crime.
And I think you're making some assumptions there that it's going to be a crime, right?
It's just facts, Tim. Like you can look at all the areas that have low-income housing, and you can look at the crime statistics, like even the existing ones. Like there's the existing low-income housing sections in Southern Maryland that you and I know of that have extremely high crime.
There are. I mean, I'm not going to discount that, but on the side of the coin, Brian, I mean, we have to be able to support our infrastructure. We have to be able to provide services in our marketplace. Isn't it better to have controlled development, but development that addresses the affordability?
I don't think the will is there, and that's my whole point. I don't think there's not a will to do that. People are not sophisticated enough to see through all this. All they think is, I don't want someone in my backyard who's going to commit a crime on my family. That's what this comes down to. And I don't want to have to drive an extra 10 minutes to work because you guys added 5,000 houses down the back of my neighborhood. Now I got to sit and wait through 3 stoplights. Like, one thing I can say is,
right,
Calvert versus Charles, I never, except for in rush hour traffic, will ever have to wait through more than a stoplight. Like, you got to stop and then the cars go and you stop.
Right.
Like, I never have to do that. And if I did, I'd move.
Where would you move to, Brian?
I'd move to South Carolina. But if I had to move in Southern Maryland, I'd move over to like St. Mary's.
Well, I think there is a balance.
I'd come down with you in the country, bro. Out yeah.
It's a lot of grass. It's a lot of turkeys, a lot of chickens, a lot of goats. Let's just call it what it is.
It is what it is.
challenge. So at the end of the day, Brian, we do have to address this. We've got to get back. People need to be responsible. People need to be attentive, and we've got to make some responsible decisions. I have a hard time with that decision, to be honest with you.
So it kind of goes back to this like idea that at one point in time, our country looked at our country as a collective of people that are working together for the greater good, and a collective selfishness has taken over, and
right.
people primarily look out for, well, what about me and my personal situation? The idea that you would ask somebody to sacrifice their lifestyle in order to add to the greater good is a hard sell in 2024.
It is because we look at it from a couple standpoints. We want to make sure that everybody is working to address the needs. We don't believe in entitlement. We believe that everybody should get out and bust their tail. And unfortunately, I'm not sure everybody has that same outlook.
Well, even the people that bust their tail that work at retail outlets and or places, they can't afford the current housing market. So even if it wasn't that, it's just the idea that we would all somehow agree to collectively sacrifice for somebody else. I think that ship has sailed in America.
Well, I don't think it has. And so you and I disagree. I think
How are you going to, what evidence would you use?
I think we need to get back to people being responsible and accountable for their actions. I mean, let's face it.
You want to get back to that, but you and we're nothing. We're peasants. Like, where's the evidence that that's happening, or that anybody has that? Like, what politician is saying that, or what group of people?
I think we need to turn our politicians around. I agree.
Who's we?
Yeah.
Like me and you?
You and I. Yeah.
We got calls to make, Tim. We can't be getting involved in all this right now. See, it goes back to selfishness, Tim. I'm worried about me. I'm trying to get cheddar.
Okay. And at the same time, you know what? I drove a Honda Civic without any eyes, 300,000 miles. I know. And right now, Brian, I know you're driving a car that what, does it have heat today? I mean, think about it.
Yeah,
right?
my thermostat's up.
Yeah, and then
these are first world problems.
I think we need to make people aware of, hey, you know what? There's sacrifices you have to make. If you want to buy a home, you have to make a sacrifice. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, what about the idea that we're all going to get together and say, hey, we're going to allow for low income housing in this area? It is not happening.
Okay, so let's stop right there. Here's the thing: ownership is different from rentals.
Okay.
And my point to you is this: when people own something, they take pride in what they own. They take pride in their work. It contributes to the property tax.
Even let's get away from low income housing, and let's get away from crime. Just the idea that we're going to add to the population, even if they're like $500,000 house. If we said we're going to build a neighborhood of 5,000 houses, we got plenty of trees we can plow down to do that. Like,
sure,
let's do it. I would say that the will is not there. It's not there here. It's not there anywhere.
I think it needs to be. We need to turn it around, because you and I both know at the end of the day, we're growing. It is what it is. It's ultimate. It's going to happen. It's like gravity. It's going to happen. If it's gravity,
it's not. The current elected officials got elected based on the principle of no growth. It's not going to, at least not going to happen while we're probably alive. So it's like gravity. You just don't fight it. You just live with it. It is what it is, right?
You
can't be mad about gravity, Tim. It'll make a bad life.
Oh, geez. I'm always fighting gravity. You know what I mean? That's the way life is. What can I tell you? All right, brother.
All right, Tim.
All right, man. We'll talk with you.
All right.